Hey, what's going on, everybody? Hope you guys are doing well. I know I'm doing pretty good this morning. We got another nice day here in Tampa. Looks like I'm gonna be dealing with some rain, but just another day in Florida in the summer. I've been enjoying doing these team preview videos. It's one of my favorite exercises I do every year as far as studying the rosters before the season, getting my general feeling on the teams and how I do feel about those teams' players for fantasy football. So it's something I've always enjoyed doing my whole life, and then I've kind of turned it into content creation over the last few years. And I'm using that now to help create some content here on my personal YouTube channel that I've got going on, getting started up this summer. Today I am going to speak about the Cincinnati Bengals. Just in case we have any first-time listeners to my team previews, give you a quick synopsis, I guess, of what's going to happen. Basically, I'm going to take a look at the Cincinnati Bengals. I'm going to talk about the coaching staff, how I feel about that going in. Take a look at your cap space, notable players entering a contract year. I take a look over the offensive unit and give my feelings on it. Same thing with the defensive unit. And then when I'm going over both those units, obviously more focused on the offensive side of the ball, I go more in depth because I am giving this a perspective as well from a fantasy football aspect. So if you want to own like a Joe Burrow, a Jamar Chase, I'll go into that today. And a little couple notes too for people. The projected starters for offense and defense, that is pulled from the Prospect Encyclopedia. That is a project I've been part of. We originally released the original version last year. The second edition is actually going to come out here, I believe, in the next 1 to 2 weeks. I believe maybe 2 to 3 weeks. I don't want to put a specific time frame on it. I know it's supposed to be going into publishing this weekend, so I've been able to see what Rob's going to do. So it's going to look very pretty this year. But not to get too sidetracked. Basically, if you see anybody on these projected starters or on the notable backups with a star next to their name, that means they have a full scouting report in the book on them that you can go check out. You can pre-order it at All Access Football. And basically, to qualify for that book, you had to have less than 12 career regular season starts, and you have to be from the last 3 draft classes. So these are either like rookies coming into the league or under the radar guys that are growing from role players to starters, or maybe they're like pretty good role players, or they're just solid backups. You never know who you can learn from that book. But after last year, it's been a proven success as far as our ability to project people that are going to be on rosters and stuff like that. So definitely go pre-order that. But yeah, let's go ahead and get into this. I'm gonna go ahead and talk about Zach Stacy. Did I say Zach Stacy? Zach Taylor. I am so sorry, Coach Taylor, on that one. Zach Stacy's that former Rams Vanderbilt running back. I was actually talking about him with some Rams content creator about a week ago. So I guess his name was on my brain. So I do apologize about that. I'm not going to restart my whole video just because I messed up there. But yeah, Coach Zach Taylor, he's been the Bengals coach for the last 2 years, and it feels like we really don't know much about him. He's not really, I don't know, he's not really out there in the public, obviously because, I mean, he's in a small market town, and then he hasn't won a lot of games, so he's not getting much national media attention. I was lucky enough when I was at the Senior Bowl, he was one of the head coaches, so I got the chance to not necessarily talk to him one-on-one, but be close around him as far as in the post practice press conferences. I know when I was with Blitzalytics, we interviewed him after a practice. He obviously did the media sessions. I thought he always handled himself well. And if you guys haven't checked this one out, I definitely highly suggest going to check out the series. It's the Flying Coach podcast series with Peter Schrager and Coach Sean McVay from the Rams. They bring a bunch of coaches on there. There's I think 10 episodes they did. That just came out this summer. Go watch it if you're a football fanatic. You're gonna love all the content that came out of it. But for one of the episodes, they had Zach Taylor on there. So, I mean, you kind of get to know who that guy is, and you kind of I gained even a little bit more respect for him. I just think I know a lot of people do trash on him because he was just a quarterback for coach for Sean McVay, I think for 1 year. So the old saying, just have a cup of coffee with Sean McVay and you're going to get a head coaching job. It definitely kind of seems like it rings true for Zach Taylor. But he kind of walked into a bad situation. You know, they're just coming out of the Marvin Lewis era. And obviously that was like a transition year, that first year with Andy Dalton. So that was just a rough year to be a part of. And then last year, he gets Joe Burrow. Things are kind of looking good. Joe Burrow's the team's being competitive, and then Joe Burrow gets hurt, and he's done all year. And he still managed to find a way to win 2 or 3 games. It was like Brandon Allen at quarterback. So I mean, I know it's not super impressive, but at least he was still being figuring out a way he can put his team in the best position to win games. But it is a prove it year, I think, for Coach Taylor, because it's his third season. I'm one of the believers, you should give coaches time to implement their culture, implement their strategy, their scheme, get the players they want, all that type of stuff. So by year 3, that's when you want to see that significant jump in wins or just an overall culture in the organization. So this is something where you need to see that translate on the field this year for Coach Taylor. And, I'm going to go into it in a second, but I think he definitely has enough to win some games. I don't know if they're going to make that necessary playoff push. That is still definitely possible. You never know. But they can't be a top 5 pick team this year. They had the number 1 pick for Joe Burrow last year. The previous year, and then they had the number 5 pick, which they spent on Jamar Chase this year. They need to get outside the top 10. I mean, you might not have to make the playoffs to keep your job, but they have to at least be pushing for like maybe a wild card spot by the end of the year. So yeah, the jury's out on Zach Taylor this year, and he has to prove himself. So let's go ahead and get into this. I'm taking a look at them, their current remaining cap space and notable players entering a contract year. So this number is definitely not the right when I pulled it up last night, but they currently are have the 9th most cap space as of last night with $17.4 million. But Sam Hubbard signed a 4-year, $40 million extension yesterday. I didn't see any specific numbers as far as the cap hits year to year. So obviously over the cap.com, which I use for all my salary cap info, obviously they have not had the info to properly adjust the cap space for Cincinnati. So I'm not sure how much that goes down, but they don't have the full. I'm imagining the 17.4 is going to drop at least a little bit, depending on how they structured Sam Hubbard's new contract. So that is one of the guys that was entering a contract here. They already got a contract extension done. The one guy they have to get done, they better not let him get to the offseason. I mean, I know they can always franchise tag him, but it's Jesse Bates. They're really good safety. This kid's out of this world. He basically had I think he might have got voted All-Pro last year. If he didn't, I know when I was with Blitzalytics last year, we all voted on All-Pros, and I voted him as an All-Pro for the season he had. He's actually one of 10 players since 2018 to have a season of 75 plus tackles, 12 plus pass deflections, and 3 plus interceptions. So the guy flies all over the field, he makes tackles, and he gets his hand on the ball. That's all you can ask out of your safety. So they definitely should be trying to lock him up before the season starts, and have him in that locker room for years to come. Darius Phillips is a cornerback I like. He's pretty fun to watch. He just needs to stay on the field. He's had some health issues over the last couple of years that has prevented him from playing like a full season schedule. But when he's on the field, he can be a nice little corner in their secondary. I'm not expecting an extension for him. I think the team wants him to prove that he can be on the field, to show that his durability is going to be something they can depend upon. He's probably going to be a guy they let play out this year and probably sign at the end of the year, but who knows? Maybe they can get him on a good deal. Billy Price, don't expect that to happen. He was a guy I was really high on when he entered the draft. He got drafted in the first round. He's not even starting right now. He's in a backup role, so maybe he can revive his football career in somewhere else. And maybe if a team needs a center or a guard, he can play either spot. Maybe the Bengals can find a trade partner for him this year. And then Auden Tate is a guy I've always liked. He's their 4th wide receiver behind the big 3 in front of him. He's always been a guy that's flashed whenever he's on the field. He just never had a chance to take a significant amount of snaps. But maybe this year he can work himself in the rotation and get paid at a later time. I mean, maybe if a wide receiver needy team reaches out to the Bengals, they could trade for him this year as a 1-year rental. But I don't see that happening because the one thing you're probably going to hear from me say throughout this episode is the Bengals don't really have a lot of depth. That's my one big concern before we even get started. So yes, let's just do that then. Let's go ahead and get started. Again, these are the projected starters from the Prospect Encyclopedia. Ryan Frederick, he was the one that wrote the Bengals section this year. His Twitter handle is at RyanFred1415. This was actually my first time I ever got to work with Ryan, and he did some good work. I got a chance to look it over last night when I was preparing for today's episode. But yeah, let's go ahead and get this started. Let's start with the quarterback position. Joe Burrow, dude, that dude's an absolute stud. He was coming on so really great when I feel like he was starting to hit his stride as we were getting toward past the midpoint of the year last year. He plays the game so poised, he's so composed, and he just knows how to get the job done. I mean, that's all you could ask for. But unfortunately, he did get hurt last year, and that's why he's actually in the Prospect Encyclopedia again for 2 years in a row. He has no reason being in the book this year, but he only had 10 starts last year, so he qualified for it. So as far as a fantasy aspect, I think Joe Burrow definitely is a guy you should be taking a chance on later in the drafts. He's got a really nice trio of wide receivers he can spread the ball to. He's a guy I think you could partner with, maybe a veteran quarterback like Matt Ryan, like I mentioned in the Falcons video. Let maybe Matt Ryan start the year and then put Joe Burrow in once he's confirmed healthy. I do know that they said he is good to go for training camp. They said he's 100% ready to rock. So I'm expecting a big year 2 out of Joe, and as long as he can stay in the field, he's going to keep this team competitive. He's always going to keep the team in inside games. So he's going to be a leader, and I think this offense is going to flow through him, and all he needs to do is be the point guard and dish it out to the skill position players that he has at his disposal. So I'm expecting a big year 2 out of Joe. Let's just hope that offensive line can come together and actually keep him healthy for all 17 games. Moving on to the running back position, Joe Mixon, he's a guy I've always really liked. Every year, I always seem to find having a number of shares of him in fantasy football. His biggest problem, of course, which everybody will always point to, is his durability. He always seems to get ticky-tack injuries that either take him out of games, but then he's back the next week, or maybe he misses a week or two. So you just want to see him be a week in and week out player, and not have to deal with any type of injury that would hold him back. For those that know I've been that I've watched previous videos, I've been pulling stats for people. I like to collect stats from 2018, since 2018. I like to collect the stats from the previous 3 seasons. So you kind of get an idea who's been the most productive players from the last 3 years. This kind of gives you an idea, I think a better idea as far as who's been the good players. Sometimes, if you stretch it out too far, I think that's too big of a sample size. I like that 3-year size from the NFL, looking into NFL stats. So speaking of that, Joe Mixon, since 2018, he's got the 8th most rushing yards per game with 75.9. And then he also has the ninth most rushing yards since 2018 with 2,733. So he's been productive whenever he's on the field. That's the biggest thing, is when he's on the field. To me, Joe Mixon's a guy, he's probably going that 2nd or 3rd round range depending on who you're drafting with. But he's a guy where if I can land a top back in the 1st round, I would love to try to grab Joe Mixon as my RB2 in the 2nd or 3rd round. And then you got a guy that can put up RB1 numbers, but you don't have to depend on him being the guy. But then I would always throw the caveat in with Joe that you probably want to follow up with a running back in the next 2 to 3 rounds, just because the history is there with that he's probably gonna miss a game or two. But I mean, just because he produces when he's on the field, I'm always willing to take a gamble on Joe. And also too, because it's very hard these days to draft a running back in fantasy football that's going to completely dominate the touches. And for the first time in his career, with Giovanni Bernard leaving in free agency, he has a pathway to dominate the touches and be on the field all 3 downs. I don't expect Samaje Perine to cut into his touches. There's been a report that some of the coaching staff likes their new rookie Chris Evans, but I don't really expect that. And they do got Travion Williams too, but I think most of those guys are going to fill in, when Joe needs a break. So I think Joe's going to get a lot of volume this year, which is something I am willing to take a gamble on. Maybe it's going to be my one last time taking a gamble on Joe Mixon, but I am willing to do it. Taking a look at the wide receivers from the Bengals, uh, I mean, these three wide receivers, if they can play up to their true potential this year, they could quickly become one of the best wide receiver triplets in the NFL. T. Higgins was a guy, he was a top 5 wide receiver for me in his draft class. I loved him coming out of Clemson. He really showed some promising things last year. Prior to Joe Burrow getting hurt, him and Joe were forming this really great chemistry and were picking apart defenses earlier in the year for the Bengals. So he's entering his second season. He's comfortable within the offense. I think he can have a really good, solid year. And then you look at Tyler Boyd. Tyler Boyd's always been like he's this under the radar fantasy football wide receiver that can produce for you. He's more of a PPR machine. He does such a great job working out of the slot, and I think now with T. Higgins and Jamar Chase working on the outside of him, that's going to open up some passing lanes for him to not only just get the catches, but I think he's going to have a lot of room to get the yards yards after the catch too. So I think Tyler Boyd's set to have a good year, and then Jamar Chase, the dude, literally lit up college football with Joe Burrow. So even though they haven't played football with together in a year, I think the chemistry is going to be there. Now, I'm not trying to base that off one video, but there's a video from the Bengals practice yesterday where Joe hit Jamar Chase on the sideline, and Jamar went up and snagged it with one hand and just kept on running into the end zone. Now, this was just a standard there's no defense. It's just a standard pass to throw, pass to catch. But, it just shows that those guys got to, they're on some type of wavelength, and I think that could easily translate over into Jamar Chase's rookie year. If the ball bounces their way right, I don't really see their tight ends cutting into the to the passing attack. And like I mentioned, Auden Tate's really the only other wide receiver behind them that probably would work into the rotation. I definitely see a scenario if this is a pass happy offense. I could see all three guys getting close to that 1,000-yard range in terms of yards. I don't really have a preference of who I would want because I like T. Higgins. I'd be totally comfortable drafting him. Jamar Chase is a rookie wide receiver. I'd be comfortable drafting on my bench and eventually sliding him in once him and Joe establish that chemistry and get things rolling. And then Tyler Boyd, he's that guy. I think I mentioned this in one of my previous videos. I usually play in leagues that have 3 wide receiver sets. So one of the wide receivers I try to grab one of the 3 wide receivers I try to grab is a PPR guy. He's not going to be a guy that's going to blow up every week. Maybe he's not going to get you those big plays. I play well in a league that you get bonus points for like 40 plus yard plays. He's probably not going to be that guy, but he's going to get peppered with targets and peppered with receptions where he's getting you a solid floor every week. So I'm totally comfortable drafting him. Like any of those guys, I don't have a preference. If I'm fine with drafting them wherever they're going in drafts, because I do think as long as Joe Burrow is on the field, I think all 3 are going to be able to produce. But you want to figure out who's going to get the most targets. So do pay attention to preseason reports. Do watch the preseason. Do look at the Bengals and see. Yeah, you can't really gauge that too much, but kind of try to get an idea maybe who's going to get most of the targets, and maybe that would be the one guy you go after. Their tight end position, Drew Sample. He's more of a blocking tight end. I know he kind of did a little bit as a receiving tight end last year, but I'm not trying to draft Drew Sample. Now, a couple things though for their backups tight ends. If you look over there, CJ Uzomah, he's been a fantasy relevant tight end in the past, and then last year he was actually. I thought he was about to become fantasy relevant again and be worthwhile picking off the waivers because Joe was looking his way, but then he got hurt and his season was over. But if Uzomah's fully healthy and maybe he can work his way onto the field, do watch out and see if he maybe develops a potential chemistry for that. But like I just mentioned, I think a lot of that's going to go to those wide receivers as far as the targets. And then Thaddeus Moss, he came in the league banged up, so his rookie year was pretty much a redshirt year. He kind of bounced all over the league. I think he was with Washington for most of the year. I'm not sure when they released him. Now he's on the Bengals with Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow again. So maybe those 3 can reinvent, or I'm probably messing up the word as far as what they did at LSU when they won that championship. But those three are together once again. Now the biggest concern with this, the biggest concern, obviously though, with the Bengals offense is the play of their offensive line. Obviously, the play of the offensive line did lead to Joe Burrow getting banged up last year, but I do think it's a slightly improved from last year. Jonah Williams, that's the biggest thing, man. He's their left tackle. He was drafted in the 2018 class in the top 10, but he's only played 10 games since then. That's why he's in the prospect encyclopedia again. But I was really high on him. He just has to stay healthy. He has all the tools to be a really great left tackle in this league. Jackson Carman's a guy that played left tackle at Clemson. They're going to move him inside to guard. We'll have to see if he can play pretty well as a rookie. If not, that's a big concern. Trey Hopkins is a solid center. Quentin Spain's he's an all right guard, and then Riley Reef is a good veteran tackle, but we'll have to see if he can adjust really quickly because he was the left tackle of the Vikings. Now he's going to be the right tackle of the Bengals. But I don't know if I really love the moves they did, but you have to admit they at least acquired, they at least attempted, and we'll have to see how that works out. I think these guys are good enough where they can give Joe enough time and not get him killed this year. But the biggest concern is it doesn't work out and it's very bad, or if injuries hurt them because they do lack depth in that Bengals offensive line group. So that's the biggest thing I think can hold the Bengals offense back. Again, is their offensive line. But if their offensive line can just be adequate enough this year, I think this could be a very exciting offense we can watch on the field this year underneath Joe Burrow. And now moving on to the defensive roster. Again, these are projected starters per Ryan Frederick. Go give him a follow at RyanFred1415. Looking at their defense, I think they kind of got a sneaky good defense. If these guys this is like I mentioned this, like I said, I'm going to say this all throughout the episode. As long as the top guys stay healthy, because this is another group, they don't really have depth behind them. You see all those stars next to the name over there and the notable backups. That means they have a lot of guys that lack NFL experience. But taking a look at their starters, I like their defensive front. Sam Hubbard and Trey Hendrickson, they're pretty good, pretty solid, I would say, bookend rushers. So they have guys that can get after the quarterback between those two, at least. Obviously, you do have concerns about the lack of guys in the rotation that can get after the quarterback. DJ Reader is a good pick. DJ Reader takes up a lot of space. That's how I'll say that. He's a pretty good D tackle. He got banged up last year, and they do have Mike Daniels they can have in the rotation, and Larry Ogunjobi can wreak some havoc at times in the middle. So it's not like an overly dominant group, but these are guys that get the job done. And so I think these are guys who are going to have a pretty good solid defensive front. But again, if one guy goes out, man, that the lack of depth is going to really show quickly for the Bengals. Their linebacker group I really like as far as potential. Jermaine Pratt's in his third or fourth season, so he's starting to come along. Akeem Davis-Gaither and Logan Wilson were both top 10 linebackers for me in last year's class. Logan Wilson's more of he's a good coverage linebacker, so is Akeem Davis-Gaither. Davis-Gaither can be like a Swiss Army knife. He can kind of be lined up all over the place. So these are guys that are, if they can kind of mold together and complement each other's skill sets, I think they got a good solid group that can command the middle of the field. So I definitely like that. But again, I should probably not even keep on saying it, but again, man, they lack some depth in the linebacker room as well too. And then as far as their secondary, I think their secondary could be a ball hawks, turnovers, a shutdown, like no fly zone, really, to be honest. But they all have to stay healthy, and they all have to play up to their true talent. At their cornerback group, though, they got Chidobe Awuzie from the Cowboys and Trey Waynes, and then they signed Mike Hilton for the Steelers. Mike Hilton's a top 5 nickelback in this league, and like I mentioned previous, I like Darius Phillips, and I would not be surprised to see him work himself in that rotation among the cornerback group. So they got good solid corners, and then like I already talked up Jesse Bates. He's basically an all-pro talent to me. And then Von Bell is a very good veteran safety for you to have. Here's an interesting stat. He's actually tied with Justin Houston for the most fumble recoveries since 2018. He's actually got 18. Yeah, he's got 8 of them from the past 3 seasons. So if the defense can manage to punch out the ball near Von Bell, he happens to have a knack for getting his hands on that ball and getting the ball into the offensive hands. So, I mean, overall, this defense, I think it's not as bad as it was last year. The biggest concern, like I said, outside of depth, though, is, I mean, I know I like Trey Hendrickson, but I don't know if he's a dominant edge rusher. So I like Sam Hubbard too. I have the same feelings about those guys, but I wonder how consistently they'll be able to get after the quarterback. How fast and will the linebacker group be able to develop and become, one with each other, so they all have a command over the defense. And then obviously the secondary, man, I think that's the strongest point of their defense. So are they able to shut down teams' passing attacks? But yeah, you got to be excited about the potential that this defense does hold. I think it's a lot better than what they had last year. And then overall for this Bengals team, I think if Zach Taylor can figure out a way to make sure that offensive line can come together and keep Joe Burrow on the field. I know that might be a lot to ask for, but if that can just happen, this is a team that can not only compete for the playoffs, but I could see this being a team, if they get hot at the right time. I mean, if the Browns or the Steelers are struggling or Ravens are struggling, they might try to go grab an AFC North or at least a wild card spot from one of their teams. I see their offense as being a very exciting offense to watch with Joe Burrow. He's with Joe Mixon, Tyler Boyd, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins. I love that group of 5. I think those guys can be playmakers within the offensive scheme. And with their defense, again, they maybe are not the sexiest defense, but they have a lot of guys within that defense that know how to get the job done, and I think they're going to play a lot better than they did last year. Overall, this is a team, I think, that's not going to be picking in the top 5, not going to be picking in the top 10. The range to me is, I think Zach Taylor, if he wants to keep his job, they got to get to 7 wins. So it's a team where I think they can finish like that 7-10 range, but if the ball bounces their way, if the young guys on the offense and the young guys on the defense can come together early in the season before the middle of the part of the year, I could see them getting hot and maybe sneaking in the playoffs. Maybe it's a 9-8 record. Maybe it's a 10-7 record. They're right there in the middle of the pack, and I do believe if they figure out the offensive line issues, and they maybe go get 1 or 2 more pieces on that defense, I think this is going to be a highly competitive team by next year. But as far as this year, I think they're a team that's going to be right there in the thick of things as we get towards the back end of the year, and it's going to be on them to see if they can make a push for the playoffs. But yeah, that's my video today. Went a little longer, probably because I went on a big Zach Taylor tangent. But I do appreciate everybody tuning into these videos. For those that have, please make sure you like. Please make sure you subscribe to this video. Go check out all the preview videos I've already done. And then my next video, let's see, this was pick number 5. I know it got traded. Yeah, the Eagles. So the Philadelphia Eagles, that will be the next video I will do. Oh, really quick, I just forgot on the defensive side of things. They play the Vikings week 1. I'm not going to stream the Bengals defense on week 1. I just realized I forgot to talk about that. But yeah, the Eagles will be my next video, guys. I hope you like this. Like, subscribe, tell a friend to watch this. I'll see you guys on my next video. Later.